Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of Canadian Profits TV. My name is Dave DeBow, and I just got back, last evening, from attending Ted Thomas's event in Vancouver. So that was a lot of fun, and on this week's episode, I'm going to share with you two things. A real estate minute, we're going to be talking about getting into investment properties with 5% down. Now that's kind of strange because usually you hear you need 20 to 25% down. And also, I'm going to be talking about a mindset minute, big lesson on bouncing back that I've learned from none other than Ted Thomas himself. So stay tuned. All right, so for our real estate tip this week, I was approached at Ted's event by one of our Canadian Real Estate Profits members, a member from Kelowna actually, and he came up to me and said, "Dave, thanks so much for the information in the program. I've put it to use, and thanks to that, I now have 2 properties and 4 doors, and I wouldn't have done it otherwise if I hadn't been a member of Canadian Real Estate Profits." So that was great to hear that. But he also talked to me a little bit about how he got the financing for these deals. So again, you'll have to check out your own situation, but basically he was very smart about it, and he bought his investment property as a personal residence first. So by doing that, he was able to get in for 5% down because he moved into the place temporarily for about 6 months, I believe, and then turned it into a rental property. So he took his first primary residence, turned it into a rental property, bought the second one, and lived in it for a while, turned it into a rental property, and turned it and suited it, and then did the same thing for his last property as well. So he ended up being able to get into these properties because he lived in them for just 5% down. So check that out with your mortgage broker first. You have to make sure that you're not bouncing around getting into mortgage fraud, but if you do actually legitimately live in the property for a while, I'm not sure how long it has to be, then you can still qualify for the 5% down. So that was kind of an interesting real estate idea. So that's your real estate tip for this week. For this week's Mindset Minute, learned a lesson from none other than Ted Thomas himself. And Ted, somebody at his event said, "Ted, how did you get in this whole tax lien, tax deed business in the first place?" And he explained that in the 70s and early 80s, he was actually big time into apartment building investing. So together with a group of investors, he actually ended up with over 2,000 doors. And he bought apartment buildings in Phoenix, Arizona, as well as Stockton, California, if I'm not mistaken. Built up this big portfolio, did all the tricky things they could do with depreciating the apartment buildings in order to not have to pay taxes, that kind of thing. And then unfortunately in 1986, there was a big real estate bubble and a burst in commercial real estate in the United States at that time. And bottom line, Ted and his investors lost everything and went bankrupt, which sucked in and of itself. But the worst thing was that the properties went into foreclosure. They were sold basically for 30 cents on the dollar compared to what they'd pay for them. But the biggest problem was that because they depreciated the property so much, they'd taken out all their tax benefits doing that, they ended up owing tax on the 30%, the 30% value that the properties were sold on. So bottom line, Ted ended up with a $2 million tax bill from the IRS. And we think Canadian Revenue Agency is bad here in Canada. And the IRS, you cannot wipe out your tax bill with bankruptcy. So he ended up owing $2 million to the IRS at 20% penalties a year, and they would not wipe that out. He was on the hook for that. It took him 15 years to get that finally paid out. That's a long time. But the lesson was, no matter, the big lesson for me is no matter how tough things look personally, somebody else has got it worse or has had it worse and has gotten up and over it. And that's exactly the case with Ted. He was in a bad situation. He worked himself out of it. He's now doing very well. And there always is a way out. So that's the Mindset Minute for this week. All right, thank you very much for tuning into this week's episode of Canadian Profits TV. I highly encourage you, speaking of apartment deals, if you're interested in big deals, Ken Beaton and I are going to be putting on a no-cost webinar tomorrow, Tuesday, September the 17th, starting at 6 p.m. Pacific. If you haven't already registered for that, I think we have a few spots left. You can check that out at CanadianProfitsWebinar.com. It's called Big Deals, Bigger Benefits, Biggest Profits. And Ken's going to be going over the pros and the cons of getting into big deals here in Canada, showing you how to do it right, showing you how to protect yourself so you don't have situations like what Ted and his investors went through, and how to get up and started and just get into getting 10, 15, 20 doors at a time with big deals. So check that out, CanadianProfitsWebinar.com. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.